collaboration, and grit. The Nebraska Open Meetings Act legislates the methods by which public meetings are conducted. Information pertaining to this act is posted here in the boardroom. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the publication of the August 10th, 2026 regular meeting of the Board of Education.
I'll make a motion to approve the publication of the August 10th, 2026 regular meeting of the Board of Education.
Second.
Okay. Notices of Board of Education meetings and hearings are placed in the North Platte Telegraph and the North Platte Bulletin. The agenda is available online at nppsd.org 4 days prior to each regular meeting of the North Platte Board of Education. Sheila, can we get roll call on that, please?
Skip Baltic.
Aye.
Joanne Lund-Green.
Aye.
Emily Garrick.
Aye.
Angela Blasey.
Aye.
Mitch Wagner.
Aye.
Okay. And I would now entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the August 10th, 2026 regular meeting of the Board of Education.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the August 10th, 2026 regular meeting of the Board of Education.
Second.
Thank you. Not all at once. Roll call, please, Sheila.
Joanne Lund-Green.
Aye.
Emily Garrick.
Aye.
Angela Blasey.
Aye.
Mitch Wagner.
Aye.
Skip Baltic.
Aye.
All right. If you would all please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and just a quick announcement. You may have noticed the structure of this meeting is a little bit different. So we have invited some of our directors that frequently give us reports and are part of the meeting to be here up a little closer rather than sitting in the back row, which this is much easier to engage with you. So thank you, Dr. Moon, for that suggestion and for facilitating that today. I think this is a much better feeling to be able to dialogue with you all. So just a quick announcement.
Kind of helps us out. Our questions from the board, we've got right here that can look at those questions. Sometimes they see different ones here at the table for that. And one thing we do need to do with we want to ask questions, keep everything in the open, but remember if you want to have dialogue about a subject other than what's on the agenda, let us know ahead of time so we can put it on the agenda. Because technically we are not supposed to be having questions about something that wasn't in the agenda. So that's sometimes when we're all here, it's easy to drift into conversations that we shouldn't be having if it wasn't on the public agenda. But I do think that it brings us together. It makes it very clear that we're one team working for our students and our community. So that we're right here, and I've had questions off and on about trust and about transparency. And so hopefully this will help us to not have to have a delay between when the question is asked and when the answer is given. So I welcome to the table. We also moved you a little bit close together so you don't have to feel like you're shouting at anybody.
Thank you. All right, so we will start tonight's meeting off. We only have one item under our communications portion of this meeting, and that is our foundation report with Terry.
I'm gonna assume mic is on. And I don't have to play with the flippy thing. Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Just wanted to report out the Evening of Excellence was a success. Christmas in July raised over $25,000 to help our students and staff. So it's very exciting. Thank you for those of you who are able to attend or support through the auction items online. If you've missed any of the speeches and want to see some of them, please go to the Foundation's YouTube page and they're all there for you. We were excited to share with the new teachers about what the foundation is all about last week, and thank you for that opportunity. We also loaded them up Wednesday and got them on the Bulldogger bus, took them to see a few of the schools on the way to going downtown to have lunch and ice cream. So we were very appreciative of having that opportunity with them. Just listening to a few of the new new staff, new teachers that were there. They were very excited about all of the training that was being provided by the district, and they were just so grateful to be in this community and at this district. So thank you for all of you that put that together. They were very appreciative that Dr. Moon and you guys were able to join us for lunch. So thank you for being there. Change Wars is coming September 29th through October 6th. It'll be at the elementary schools in Madison. And so mark your calendars, start saving your change. There will be a celebration on October 9th at the football game, Bulldogs versus Omaha Northwest. The AD, Mr. Andy Webb, is an alumni of ours. So the class of 1992 will be roasting a pig and we'll be having a tailgate out there. So more information to come on that. So that's all I have. Any questions for me? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next is our public comment time. Public questions and comments may take place at this time in the agenda. Individuals who want to address the board must complete a guidelines for public comments form with the date, topic addressing, name, address, and the name of any organization you represent, and give it to the board clerk prior to the meeting.
I have one, Stuart Simpson.
Okay. Stuart, when called upon by the presiding officer, you may proceed to the table and state your name and address to address specific individual student discipline or employee performance issues. Complaint and grievance processes are in place to deal with issues of this nature. Stuart.
Hello, I'm Stuart Simpson, 1910 West William Avenue, North Platte, Nebraska, 6901. Sheila, I feel like Bernice. Knew I'd get a chuckle. I've attended, it'll be a little bit because I got to get my bifocals going. I've attended board meetings over 43 years, or with 2 meetings a month, 1,032 board meetings. I know I haven't attended this past year, but now that a new school year is upon us, we as patrons must be informed and respect the process that happens. I'd like to address 3 issues: 1, state aid; 2, special building fund; and 3, levies. Nebraska Public Schools receive a portion of their revenue from state support. This can be in a form of equalization aid and or net option funding. Due to North Platte Public Schools' size and negative option, North Platte Public Schools will receive only equalization aid. We know the state aid formula is somewhat simple. Needs minus resources equals equalization aid. The state aid formula was developed in 1990, and over the next 30 plus years, the Nebraska legislature has tweaked, if you want to say it like that, the state aid formula to control how much the state had to allocate to schools. One item affecting all schools is property valuations. When valuation increase, this reduces state aid. State aid that North Platte Public Schools receives in 2025-26, and I'm going to round, 9.1 million, and in 26-27 is 7.5 million. This decrease was very evident this year when the certified valuations from 25-26 aid was 3.1 billion. And for the 26-27 aid, it's 3.3 billion, or a $202 million increase in valuation, or a $2 million decrease in state aid. The legislature and the governor continue to talk about property tax relief, but this places the school district, Board of Education, and administration between a rock and a hard place. They're working to fund a budget that will educate over 3,000 students. NPPS budget workshops work to address the funds needed to meet those needs. North Platte Public Schools has 12 buildings, which is a large footprint in North Platte. Dr. Brocktrup had to implement a building fund to repair infrastructure back in the 1990s. This fund has continually been supported and should be considered in the future to maintain the footprint. Finally, where North Platte Public Schools compare in regards to levies and other districts of similar size, mind you, this data is a year or so old, but when comparing North Platte to other districts, we were in the middle or the lower end of the levy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now for our consent agenda. I would first entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Go ahead. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, and a consent agenda, also known by Robert's Rules of Orders as a consent calendar, groups routine meeting discussion points into a single agenda item. In so doing, the grouped items can be approved in one action rather than through the filing of multiple motions. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. On tonight's consent agenda, you have the following items. 9.1, approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2026 regular meeting of the Board of Education. 9.2, approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2026 parent involvement hearing. 9.3, approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2026 student fees hearing. 9.4, approve the minutes of the July 23rd, 2026 Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting. And 9.5, approval of financial claims and reports, which this month were looked at by Skip Altig and Cindy O'Connor, who is not here. Skip, would you provide a recommendation for the board?
Yes, I would.
And is there any other discussion, whether that be from our administrative team on any of these items or questions from the board? Okay, Sheila, roll call, please.
Emily Garrick,
Aye.
Angela Blazy.
Aye.
Mitch Wagner,
Aye.
Skip Altic.
Aye.
Jenlyn Green. Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. And we will go ahead and move into our reports and discussion items for this evening. So the first of those is our monthly financial and budget report. So we're going to go ahead and turn this over to Dr. McDonald and Dr. Moon to give us our finance and budget report.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. We have about 8 pages here, so my intent is just to go over each page and I pause and see if there's any questions and move on. Okay,
Perfect.
all right. So the first one on page 1 is just our standard general fund reports as far as the overview from the district. Again, it provides a summary of the past 11 months through July. You can see that our July receipts were $1,041,748.53. And our expenditures were on average of $4,303,192.73. Leaves us with a current cash on hand for the next month of $4,140,304.33. Our budgeted amount in regards to this year's budget, based on those numbers through July, we would be at 9.2% under budget if we had all receipts in at this particular time. Again, to the right is our payroll and payables, and then that gives you the monthly averages there as well. And then you can see our cash flow chart is at the bottom of page 1 there. Green indicates our receipts by month, and then our red indicates our expenditures to date as far as those lines of cash flow are concerned. Okay. Page 2 represents our scenarios. And again, it goes through the month of July. The scenario for August would be roughly $1 million in receipts compared to where we were again last year. And these expenditures of $4.4 million would represent our typical average of monthly receipts. That it does not represent if you decide to transfer any funds this evening as in regards to that amount. So with those receipts and expenditures, it looks like our cash on hand will be roughly $740,248.60 to end the year. Again, this is an estimate. Also keep in mind that we haven't, like we've done in past, we haven't transferred any general fund dollars to depreciation that we have historically in the past. So this amount that is here represents truly what is currently within the general fund as we move through that process for this year. So.
And we do have some grant funds that we may or may not get this.
We have some fed for reimbursement requests in federal dollars. We do that quarterly. We're still waiting on some. And we're estimating that to be about 650 to 700,000. So whether it comes in at the end of this month or the first part of September, I mean, that's just kind of where we're at with those funds, but it does represent the 25-26 budget cycle.
So when you talk about transfers, and obviously that number may change depending on what action is taken tonight, is there a certain time frame of when those transfers have to occur in the budget calendar?
Not, just kind of whenever it's indicated. So
Okay.
you could do it whenever through the budget calendar itself. Most districts typically have done that in August because they have a feel for where they're going to end.
Sure.
And then make that determination if they're going to transfer those dollars, especially if they have a positive balance or not at that particular point in time. I would point out in the scenarios, as you can tell where we are at, we're anticipating about a $53 million receipt total to the district. Disbursements around 52 million, and so that the projection is to be about 1.4% under budget at the end of the year, based on those numbers of where we're currently at with the receipts and expenditures to date. So. Okay. Page 3 is just our is the cash flow chart. It gives cash flow of all accounts, of all funds, and we currently have a total ending cash balance within the district of $9,771,359. Again, that includes the general fund as well. And those are the funds that we've utilized this year anyway in regards to some interfund loans to help support the general fund and those low receipt months that we have.
And I think that one of the things that we should take a little bit of a look at as we're planning for next year's budget is what Stuart was talking about. In that special building fund, that is a taxing. We can tax for that. It has to be within the $5 limit. But I think it's one of the places that we really need to think about because we don't have very much money in that account when we're looking at 12 buildings, 14 buildings, 12 buildings. If anything should happen to those, $350,000 wouldn't, it wouldn't even do an air handler for one building. It might do a couple of roofs. But I think that it's really important that over time, as the district can, we need to be thinking about the future and building that up a little bit at a time so that every year you put a penny or two or three or whatever you can put in there. It's just good business sense because you get to the point where you always have to go for QC-PUP, and then after that, you've used up that option, and you get to the point where you can't fix what we need to fix. And so I think that looking at these special funds, those are funds that are meant, they were created by the legislature to allow us to think about large purchases. And in the language, it specifically says depreciation funds are not to be used for cash flow. They are not a pot of money that you can just use however you want. And so, but that's kind of how we're using them because technically we don't have a depreciation fund because we have to borrow it for payroll for most of the year. And so I think that as we begin to have these discussions and begin to talk about long-term planning for the district and getting to a fiscally responsible position, how we use these special funds is really, really important in the long haul. It's for the long game. So you can budget for a bus every 3 years or a roof every 10 years or whatever. The replacement of computer textbook adoptions, because those vary from one year to the next. So 1 year you're going to do a home ec adoption. It's not going to cost near as much as language arts K-12. So I think that as we go through this year together, as we begin to talk about the budget, and we will schedule a department every month, maybe twice a month if we need to, so that we can go through the department's goals, the department's outcomes, the department's budget. so that we can look at every single line item in that particular department. So when we talk about technology, we'll look at all of that stuff. When we talk about buildings and grounds, we'll talk about how much we spend on people, how much we spend on soap for the floor, whatever it is, and be able to get that, discussion in an open meeting where people can ask questions and we can really take a look at that to help to build that trust back up with the community. For some reason, there seems to be a break between what people believe about what's going on and what is going on. We really, really need to get that cleaned up. And so that we are not feeling left out or unheard, which is both people do that. So that's our plan going forward through this year, to start working on the budget every single month, all year long. So when we come around to June and July, we know where we're at. So it's my soapbox for this, but I appreciate the pointing out of the special building fund, because it's a worry to me.
Page 4 is just your bank reconciliation, so all of the dollars that you see within all of the funds represent what we just went over with the cash flow chart, but just like to show you that that is the reconciliation from Nebraska Land Bank currently that matches. Page 5, we get into, again, just want to highlight some of the historical data that we have talked about in previous meetings. Again, at the top there, we talked about the effective levy, and that's highlighted, I believe, in your report there in yellow. And the effective levy actually represents, again, that school property tax credit that everybody receives within their own individual tax reports. And that is the actual effective levy for each individual here representing North Platte Public Schools in regards to that effective levy. The next column is just our codes over the specific years from 2019 to 2026 through July. Those represent our expenditures to date. I know that there was a request for utilities, and that was already within that historical data. And so you can see the code 2600 is our utilities for the district across each and every year, and what those totals were. Again, the example of the state funded property tax credits and how it reduces the individual taxes paid. Those were examples. And then currently where we are at with North Platte Public Schools within that framework of tax credits and the effective tax outcome. And then at the bottom, I provided a couple other additions there. Again, you can see from year 2019 to 2025, depreciation fund, what the year-end balances were, what the transfers within those particular years were. The school fund is there as well. The activity fund, what the year-end amount was within the activity fund, and then what the transfers in have been within those particular years. If it is blank, there weren't any transfers those years. And then again, the building fund, the year-end balances according to the annual financial report with those year-end balances for the current building fund at the end of each year. And then at the bottom there was a request to see some additional information as it pertained to just staff, current staff expenses as it pertains to salary. Our benefits of health insurance, FICA, and retirement are the big ones. 25, 26, those are to date. So we'll kind of wrap up our payroll and payables for everybody August 20th this month. So that will be adjusted a little bit. But what I provided for you in 26, 27, and then some trends to maybe that we want to keep our eye on based on the information to date. Health insurance, we know that 7.25% increase for this coming year that has been talked about through our EHA programs and through all of our negotiations. What they're predicting for 27 and 28 is another 10% increase, 10.5% increase in 28, 29, and an 11-point increase or even higher in 29, 30 as a trajectory as far as those health benefits or those health insurance premiums are as you look at those numbers. Again, FICA is obviously based off of what your total salary is. And then your retirement to date is, so retirement, the actuarial process is that if it is funded, if you can fund the retirement plan at 96%, the employer's contribution is roughly 7.4%. If you can fund it at 98%, the employer's contribution is 8.08%. And if it takes 100% to fund that, then it goes back to the original that it was a couple years ago, and that's 9.088%. As far as what the employer's contribution, we are currently at 7.4%, and so that's what those numbers represent moving forward on that. As far as those trends are concerned.
And remember that the employee is paying 7 point whatever, and we are matching that 101%.
Right.
And I think that as we begin to talk about planning the budget for this year and then thinking about the budget for next year, it's really important to understand that there are some variables in there, because right now we're in a really good position for how much we have to pay for that retirement, but they could change it at any time. It's a lot like our reimbursement for special education. It was supposed to be 80%, but now it's going to be 60, whatever.
Literally predict 70 to 65% and just kind of trending down. So.
And so,
To
okay,
continue.
as we begin to look at where we are and where we have to do going forward, we kind of previewed and talked about, there are certain parts of the budget we just simply don't have control of. And I think we're trying to figure out what numbers will help you the most to say, where is the liability, where is the risk in going forward. So we know that we're going to lose $1.8 million state aid. That we already know. And we'll probably lose more next year, because as valuations go up, it doesn't change the amount of money we need to do business. When the valuations go up, that transfers to the local taxpayers. Instead of getting it from the state, we're getting it from the taxpayer. I do think that when we talk about state aid, though, we do need to remember this column over here in the yellow, in this orange, because part of what we're getting in state aid is coming from that tax credit. And for us, because we're equalized, some of that tax credit money that we're getting back isn't raised locally. That's coming from a high valuation district where they have a high valuation per student to us. And so in some ways, it's a little bit of state aid. And it is a bright spot in where we are, because then we don't have to ask quite so much from our local taxpayers, because we're getting it from that tax credit. But as we go through these discussions and in between these meetings, as we're getting prepared for this next budget workshop, please ask and send us questions so that we know what numbers you would really like to see about either what we've spent or what we know is coming, or kind of where those receipts are going to come from going forward, because they're all really important variables in how we make our decisions going forward. And we can prepare those reports, but it does usually, if we want to give you accurate information, it takes some time to get that in a format that's understandable. So we're going to talk about some more budget hearing. Are we going to do that in an enrollment report? Okay.
Okay, page 6. 6 and 7 are the scenarios that we had discussed prior meetings. We have provided a little bit more information. Dr. Moon has indicated that it's probably best to show maybe worst case scenario in regards to property tax authority and what that particularly means. So we've added a column there in blue, and its scenario, it says 2.5% only. And that represents your property tax authority that each district can receive each and every year based on what that current formula is. So we currently are at 31,893,000, I believe, in some change within this year for property taxes. Our property tax authority can grow by 2.5% of that. And so, that's what they being the state within their formula would indicate. The other piece of that is that if you have new growth within that, and that comes from the county assessor, again, this is all will be reflective August 20th. The new growth would indicate any percentage that you could add on to that authority. So for example, 2 years ago, I think we were roughly around 7.5%, 8%. This last year was 4.5%, 5%. And so this year, we don't know what that new growth will be, if there is any, as it pertains to the district. So this column, so my plan is on this page is just to go over the changes on page 6. And I'm gonna flip it over to page 7 and I go through that and I'll pause for any questions, okay? All right, so again, that column with scenario 2.5% only. If you go to down that column and you'll see a blue line all the way across, that was an increase to the estimated insurance for the district. All property, all our workman's comp, all of those insurance to the district. There was a little bit of an increase there that had come up when I met with the MC, and so that's what that number represents. Okay. And then just the legal services, I think that I had previously asked that we consider about 65,000 there, just depending on legal services to the district. I have reduced that back to 45,000 in that column, just so you're aware there. If you go down to the next green one under code 4000, it's the facility acquisition and construction. For this scenario of 2.5, it would represent a 0 increase there, which you would utilize maybe that to increase potential cash reserve funds moving forward over the next several years within that column to keep it within the expenditures, and then you wouldn't have to amend your budget by doing it that way. And then within this budget, there would be $0 amount for transfers within this scenario. To stay on the expenditure side, if you go to scenario A, that also represents a 0 amount. This would be more of a zero-based budget here as far as scenario A, but also keep in mind to get to this point, we will need to be at about 8% allowable growth as far as the property tax authority is concerned within their formula to actually get to scenario A. Okay. And then everything else stayed pretty well true as far as prior discussions. But then if you go to, I didn't mark it F, but it's the next blue column to the right there. I put an F on top of that. This is a scenario to try to get to at least 1 month of fluency or solvency at the end of the year as it pertains to the district as far as beginning cash balance. And to be able to do that, we would need to be roughly around $3,250,000 of additional cash reserves within the budget to try to get to that point as it pertains to the budget within that particular year. If you go down to the receipts, I have reduced the receipts to 500,000 to start the year, and that is based on the fact that approval of transfers. Just so you know, I know the other conversation prior to that on the general fund was that we would have 740, maybe 800,000 if we didn't do the transfers. This is assuming that the transfers would be in place. Okay. If you go down, all of the other receipts stayed the same. Again, the state sources, the state aid, you can see the difference in state aid from 25-26 to 26-27. And again, that as Mr. Simpson had indicated and what Dr. Moon indicated, your local effort rate has gone up in regards to that assessed value and is indicating that you can ask for more in your property taxes or your tax authority based on that local effort rate or what the current local effort rate is. Then if you go down to the federal sources, our allocations for title came in after the meeting. Our Title I, I was hoping to estimate that around $1 million. Title I receipts actually came in below that at roughly $930,000. And then the Title II funds, actually, I thought it was going to be more, about 145,000, 140,000, and that came in again around 130,000. So those two receipts were reduced as well when I saw those allocations. Okay. I pause for a second.
And our sped reimbursement, is that a part of the state aid number?
The special education programs there for the receipts, that is not a part of the state aid, but it is a calculated receipt based on the fact that we believe it's going to be between 65% and 70% instead of 80%, according to what they're telling us at the state level.
So I have a question. On another document that was attached to this, you had indicated that with the scenario with the 2.5%, that we would have to make approximately $3 to $4 million in cuts this year, this school year. So are any of these other scenarios going to require us to make significant cuts as well, or?
It's a great question, but I would say that if we don't get to 8% on scenario A, that we will have to take a look at some potential cuts as well. And what that means, just based on whatever that percentage is, you know, if it's 5%, then that 3% that we're not getting, we'll probably have to take a look at to say, how are we going to balance this moving into the next year? If it's 1%, if it's 2%, you know, whatever the case might be.
And I think that 2.5% limit isn't a hard, fast limit, but we have to make the decision prior to September 4th, at least a direction, because if we are going to increase our tax request, there has to be a resolution of the board sooner or later for that 5%. And we've got to go to the pink postcard meeting. And so certainly Damon and I, and one of you lucky people, would need to go to that meeting, but I think it's really, really important that we understand that that 2.5% limit, it's likely we're going to need to go to that pink postcard meeting. Because, and I think Damon is really good at how to speak about that, but real growth is not just valuation increase. Real growth is something different. And so getting to 8% may or may not happen. Last year it was 4%. It was 8% before, at least one time. But it's really important to understand that we don't get to the 8% on the 20th when we get certified. We're probably going to either have to abide by the 2.5%, which won't cover much of anything, or we're going to have to go to that meeting and talk about it. So we just want to be prepared for that. It's not that we can't get past the 2.5%, but there's some hoops we have to go through, and the timing is critical. Can you talk about real growth?
Sure. Yeah, so just the real growth is based on economic presence development that's taking place within the city and the county, and then the county assessor is determining that within a formula. And that's what depicts your real growth or your additional authority. So.
And probably something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in our conversation, Dr. Moon, I think this is what we were discussing, wanting to make sure people understood, is when you look at these budget scenarios, because there is a percentage along the bottom, and that percentage is for the total requirement increase. But when we're talking about the 2.5%, we're looking at property tax request specifically. Is that correct? It only applies to that number, not to.
Yeah, it has to do with the amount of dollars we can ask. Correct.
Yes.
Be sure I'm getting it right. So that a lot of times we talk about budget in terms of the levy. The levy comes later in the process. There are the limits on how many dollars you can actually ask, how big of an increase you can ask for. Now, we have the authority, the state has said, we could ask for up to 35 million.
That's on the next
It's in the
page.
column here. We have not done that in the past, and, so we've probably not moved our, to actually tax for as much as we could anywhere. Anywhere along in the last few years, but it's there if we need it. The problem with it is if you don't access it, the next year, your 2.5% is still on that smaller amount of money. And when you start to take a look at what is the increase in actual dollars of health insurance, of utilities, of wage increases, and then you take those increases that are routine. Certainly a 1.8% salary increase wasn't a big raise for people last year. So we weren't exorbitant there, 85% of our budget. But then on the other hand, you have to also take into account, what are we losing? So in those number of dollars we have to ask for, we also have to ask for the $1.8 million in state aid that we're not going to get, because we have to do that. And so when you get to that point about how much more do we actually have to ask for in dollars, you have to include your losses and your extra expenses in order to make that work out. And, we all know that we are not in a good fiscal position already. We're not in a position where we can absorb that very long before we can't move forward. And I think, that the cuts will have to be significant if we can't get somewhere on this continuum. And it's a hard thing to do. It just is.
So I
The
think,
cuts are hard and the extra taxes are.
yes, and I think what people will absolutely need to realize is that change in state aid, because you can look along the bottom and see, if you look at scenario A, for instance, that really is only a 0.66% increase on a total revenue basis. But because there's such a decrease in that state aid, it's having to be made up for on the side of property taxes. So that's why your percentages of increases are going to look different based on your total receipts versus your property tax receipts.
So on page 7,
Thank you for remembering the first.
sure. I don't think that was my idea, but somebody can take credit for that.
We appreciate it.
So on page 7, again, if we look at that first column of 2.5% only, the caveat to that is we talked about balanced budget authority prior to the last couple months when we've had those line item or that line item there. And to balance budget authority is not a receipt. Okay, even though it's in the receipt section of the state budget to do that, it's not a receipt. It is basically a line item that you utilize to get to your property tax authority before the joint public meeting. And we would have to, in this scenario, have $1,625,000 in budget authority to indicate that we would utilize our property tax authority of that 2.5% within the budget itself, and just to get to the property tax authority. So you're losing, again, $1,625,000 of any type of cash reserve that you have within the expenditures on that line, because you're simply, again, that's all it is. You're balancing your budget authority to utilize that 2.5%. If that's the only authority that you have is 2.5%, you would have to show that as a receipt, even though you're not going to get that receipt, just to get there. So it's counting against you as a district. Okay. And then if you go down, you can see that the general fund tax request then from 25-26 is $31,383,849. 2.5% authority is $32,168,241. Okay. And then you can go down and you can see the effects of what that asking is, the new assessed value and what the levy is. But again, you're losing 1.6 to 1.8 million in state aid, and then again, with that property tax authority, it's another 1.6 million and some change within that scenario. Okay, so keep that in mind as you look at that scenario. If you go all the way to the bottom in the first highlighted section, the 26-27, the projected tax authority. Projected tax authority is $35,515,297. That is your current tax authority that NDE is estimating that you should be running your district at through their formula. That's what they're indicating. So if districts, some districts might have all the authority in the world, but they can't get to it because they don't have any room within their levy to utilize those funds, and the board can't even get there. Or they just don't have the money, period. They just cannot get there. They're already maxed out their authority at their current levy that they're at, so there's no room. And then some of them can't even utilize the 5%, even though they may ask for the 5%, because they don't have the levy. They can't do it. In our situation, you have the ability to do that. Okay, you have the ability to get to $35.5 million if you would like, because you have the levy. You have the ability to get there. Within that, you would have to go to the joint meeting on some of these scenarios. If you pass the additional 5% on the resolution, you could utilize $37,958,473. And you would have the ability to utilize that authority as well with any of these scenarios. So if I go across, knowing that information, and I go across the page, I get to scenario A. Again, that was 8% growth. If you're less than 8% growth, you may need to go to the joint public meeting. If you get to 8% growth, this is a zero-based budget. We're going to continue to do what we've done this year. Basically, we'll utilize all of our interlocal funds, and then we will continue to utilize a line of credit throughout the course of the year to make payroll and payables for 3 to 4 months, typically within that scenario. Scenario B and C, again, you can see that the difference between B and C is about $500,000 increments of additional reserves that you're building into that budget. Okay, so B is 500,000, C is 100,000, D is 1,500,000, and E would be 200,000 that you're building into those budgets. Okay, so in scenario B and C, it would be a joint public meeting to access the tax authority that you would need within those scenarios. And then on E, maybe D, E, and then F, as far as utilizing and trying to get to 1 month expenditures. As you can see, I'm going to go all the way to the 1 month expenditures on the blue column. The tax asking in that, or requirement in that one, is $37,345,009. Your property tax authority is $37,958,473. You would have the ability to approve that scenario and move to solvency for 1 month, basically. With that particular scenario, utilizing the additional authority, you would have to utilize the additional 5% and pass that resolution. Again, for the joint public meeting, all information needs to be into the county assessor by September 4th. And currently, Julie indicated that the meeting is set for September 17th. Okay. And then the last column is the 27-28 scenario. Again, this is a scenario, it's estimates, it's based on if we were at 1 month solvency. So you could see that if we were to make that commitment this year, our levy would be right around $1.04, almost $1.05. But then with the scenario of 27-28, making some adjustments in regards to increases on salaries, benefits on the expenditure side, even reducing our cash reserve, reducing our state aid, you have the flexibility to do some different things with special building now. You have the flexibility of doing some additional funds within your qualified capital purpose undertaking, if you so choose to do that, as you look at your projects that you have on the docket when it comes to such things as roofs, such things as replacing HVAC units, such things as if there was a major disaster, you know, a weather disaster, whatever it might be, fire, you know, whatever, you would have some funds available to plan for those types of things moving forward within that scenario. So that is page 7.
Further question?
I reserve the right to change my mind if I have
Okay.
questions, but at this time.
The last page is page 8, and I won't take up a lot of your time on that. Again, these are just the totals from what I just presented. So if you want a quick, short version of, instead of 2 pages and all the columns, this is your total expenditure requirements, receipts, goes through the tax request asking, valuations, levies, special building, qualified capital undertaking, and then total levy. And it gives kind of a narrative there at the bottom in regards to some things that we would have to consider as far as the district is concerned, based on what those scenarios present.
And I think that's a little bit of a scenario, Joanna, that you asked, in terms of what actually does that mean to the district in operations is really, really important as we look forward. And I think there's a couple of caveats that we need to think about. Well, what we began to take a look at some budget scenarios here is to have 1 month's solvency at the end of 2027. The fact of the matter is, though, that 1 month's the $4.5 million does not mean that we would not have to borrow. We would still have to borrow during the year, interfunds. Hopefully, we wouldn't have to borrow on our line of credit as often. But it moves us in the right direction. And so I think that we want to be open and totally transparent that even though it had in that second year, you could move forward and we could move forward with 1 month's receipts. That does not mean that we're out of trouble. It does not mean that we have enough money to fund the budget without borrowing from our depreciation funds, especially. So I think that we want to be totally open with the public that we could do this in that next year. And certainly the recommendation that I would make is if we have any way to get close to that last column there, it's the right thing to do for the district, because we know that consistently we're gonna lose state aid. Consistently, our expenses are gonna go up. And that we need to plan for that. We need to put the district in a position where we don't all of a sudden come to a year when we would have to go to that first column and try to cut $3 million out of the budget. And when you think about the column without the big postcard meeting, you have to put those numbers in perspective. When you're talking about 1.8 million, just the lost in state aid, that's approximately 18 teachers. We don't have a lot of 18 extra teachers laying around somewhere. It's 12 administrators. It's putting off your textbook adoptions for multiple years. Probably you'd have to delay your textbook adoptions 5 years to pay that. And so we will get valuation increases, hopefully, but there have been years when we didn't get valuation increases. Now, then maybe our state aid would come back up, but that's not there. I think that, we do need to talk about the reality of what each of these scenarios go. And so I think what we've tried to do here is to present some scenarios that would at least allow you to drift in the right direction, even if we can't go all over to blue, which is where we would like to see it. But we have to make that decision. I wish that I had a lot more history. We're going to be talking about some of the history and some of the cuts that the district's already done. But that's one of the reasons we've got people at this table who do have the history and do understand operations and do understand where, if we had to cut, we could cut. Uh, and what that would mean to our programs, but we are, and I guess this is repetitive, trying as much as possible to give you real, accurate information so that you can make that choice as we go into this budget season. Because unfortunately, your new soup comes on 1st of July and the budget has to be set 2 months later. And so we have to do it. So please ask questions. Please bring up your concern.
And I would like to say that I think lack of information has been a frustration that I've had on my tenure as a board member. And I want to say thank you because I feel like I probably have the most information right now that I've ever had as a board member. And I've asked a lot of questions, some of them in email, some of them in meetings, some of them on phone calls. And every time that I've asked a question, we've had, I mean, I think the board has a lot of spreadsheets and all kinds of things that we have to review that we've just never had before. So I really, really appreciate that because it is very hard to make decisions and it's also very hard to have trust when you don't have answers to questions and you feel like you're lacking information. I mean, you simply cannot make a good decision when you don't have all information needed to make that decision. So I really appreciate that. The word that I used to my husband was a breath of fresh air. So thank you for that and for this process because I think we all have to be willing, whether we agree on everything or not, we all have to be willing to lay everything out there and ask all of the questions and have all of the information. So I really appreciate the work that's been done putting this together.
I don't have a page 9, so.
Mic drop.
So I think probably at this time, it would be good to open this up for discussion from the board. If there are any additional questions that you have about maybe some of these budget proposals, if there's additional information that you feel like you need in order to make an informed decision, if you have, ideas, concerns, those kinds of things, I think we want to address those now. One of the things that Dr. Moon and I discussed was that feeling of frustration when all of a sudden it's budget season and it's a time crunch and you have to make this decision, by a certain deadline. And a lot of times I think we're left feeling rushed into a decision and we don't want that. So I don't want those conversations to wait until we have a budget hearing. And then all of a sudden we realize we're not in agreement on something. I would rather we ask those questions and get to the bottom of those things now. And I do think moving forward, Dr. Moon's idea of each month taking a department and really diving in to the budget will be much better for us moving forward. We obviously don't have time to do that in the next, month.
20 minutes.
Yeah,
10
unless you guys want to have a meeting every day for the next couple of weeks, which I don't think we do. So we want to do the best that we can. I think our next committee of the whole meeting will be budget focused again. I think we still have the option if we need to schedule a budget workshop, we could. And what I would like to see us do as a board during that time is those spreadsheets that were sent with kind of all of our expenditures more rather than like by department, more by vendor, those types of things. It gives us a different way to look at that information. And I think that might be something that could facilitate some good discussion of just, hey, why did we spend this amount of money here? And oftentimes as board members, we just don't know. And more importantly, the public also does not know. So if we are doing that in a meeting and we're showing that we are really going through this and looking at things very carefully, I personally would feel a lot better about making a decision. So those are my 2 cents. I would like to hear from everyone else.
This is very well laid out and it is, so was the one we got at the committee of the whole that I've looked at like 7 times, I think, since that meeting. But also I think I like some of the explanations on that last page. I think that makes a lot of sense. The condensing down, where you have a scenario of what it would do, I think is really good. Also, the fact that I think I need to continue to study this, Because I know we're on a time crunch. However, we also know that we need to have an understanding of exactly what all of this means. I'm not an accountant major, so it takes me a bit of time to get through some of this, but it makes a lot of sense. I took some numerous notes here, by the way, as you talk. But I really like this, and I think when we come back, I probably will have numerous questions that you will be able to answer, I think, but I think it's very open, and whether we'll agree, 6 of us on a scenario, we'll have to see, but I think it really lays it out pretty well on each one of these that you have. So I appreciate that a lot.
And I think that one of the discussions that we had on the long drive here was, do you want that budget hearing to be in this room where it can be televised? And then we can go back out to the buildings at a different time. Because this, if you want the public to see those, we could schedule the committee of the whole here rather than in a building.
Probably a good idea.
I think that probably would be best also. I really enjoy having our meetings in the buildings, but I also know it's really hard to go back and listen to those meetings when there's not a video and the sound is not always the best. And, 3 hours of a budget discussion when you have no faces to watch while they're speaking is very difficult. So yes, we are putting it out there, but it also doesn't feel super transparent because it's not very easy to digest the information. So that would probably be my thought. I know that throws off our scheduling with getting into our schools a little bit, but I think it would be the best thing.
Yeah, I agree. Watching that or listening to the committee of a whole meeting was not as great as watching a meeting.
Any other thoughts and questions from board members on these budget proposals? I think we will need to, as Dr. Moon mentioned, really by the end of this month, know somewhat of a direction that we're moving forward, because if it does require us to go to the joint public hearing, we would need to know that.
Didn't that get changed in legislation where we all have to go, or is that for next year?
They actually dropped that.
Oh,
That is next year, goes in, and they have to hold it in July.
okay.
The original bill had every member of every board, every commissioner, all had to attend. But that was dropped. You have to have, it will be held in July, and you have to attend no matter what. But you only need one member of your board or one person there, but that will start in July of 27.
And I think if you want to look deeper into some of the line items, give us a heads up and then we can bring them, especially if we need data. If you want to know how much we spent on textbook adoptions or whatever, we can certainly show.
I think my philosophy on looking at the different scenarios, I would imagine that all of us are in agreement that we need to move towards having cash on hand. Like, I don't think that there's been disagreement about that. I think that that is really important. I also just think that we need to probably realize this isn't a problem that we got into overnight, and it's probably not one we're going to get out of overnight either. And that's going to take, that takes a lot of trust, and that takes a shared commitment of not just the board, but it takes a shared commitment of future board members, of directors, of teachers, of everyone, because historically, if that were the issue, if just raising a levy were the issue, we wouldn't be in this position right now. The levy was maxed out for a long time, and we still didn't have cash on hand. So that tells me that there's an issue that was beyond just what the levy amount was. So I think that this is something we absolutely can solve. I think we've got some scenarios in front of us that provide some opportunities to do that. but it has to take everybody on board with doing that, because if we say that we're budgeting $1 million to go into cash reserves, then we have to have the confidence that come the end of that year, there are $1 million to go into cash reserves. And that can all change very quickly, depending on who's sitting in what seats and what decides to be done 4 years from now, 5 years from now with those dollars. And we could very quickly find ourselves back in a position with zero cash reserves. So this needs to be a long-term conversation, and it is uncomfortable. And I understand not everybody is okay with being the bad guy sometimes. But I just think everybody has to be on board with realizing this is where we want to go, and it takes all of us to be able to get there. Anything else on budget? Okay,
Thanks, David.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. As a board, are we feeling like we need any additional scheduling with budget workshop? Do you feel like if we have committee of the whole here, and again, it's focused on that, does that feel sufficient for where we are at? What are we thinking on being able to move forward with a budget?
I kind of feel like we need to know approximately where everybody is, just because otherwise we won't really know maybe what additional information we might need. So I think it would be helpful if everybody could say, you know, I'm at scenario C, D, you know, where we're at exactly, just so that we kind of know where everybody's at, and then that might help us know what we.
Do you want to start us off? Where do you feel like you are?
I'm probably on the higher end, probably, I would say maybe around B. I'm not sure I'm ready to go all the way to F, because I feel like that would be a huge increase, for our patrons, but I guess I just, part of the reason I asked the question of Dr. McDonald that I did is that I don't want us to get into a scenario, as I've mentioned several times, where we're starting to affect students. I mean, every time we've been able to make cuts in the budget so far, for the most part, it's been as far away from the classroom as possible. My fear is if we stick with something lower, in a lower category, that we'll have to start looking at things like letting positions go, and or, you know, consolidating or letting programs go, or those kinds of things. And so I just really want to make sure that we're in a position where we're not having to make significant cuts, and especially cuts that are going to affect students and the opportunities that we offer them.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that.
I'm in total agreement with Joanne.
Okay.
I really am. Everything you said, I was gonna say, so I don't need to repeat it. But that was well, and I'm in agreement with you on that.
So you like scenario D?
Yes.
Mitch, not to put you on the spot. Where are you thinking?
I'm probably, C to D, but I'd also like to know where we can make cuts, because I think you're gonna have to do both. I don't think you're gonna solve it with, maximizing the tax. It's against my nature to want to raise taxes ever. But sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But I think cuts have to go hand in hand with it, and I'm sorry for that, but that's reality.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Angela?
Well, honestly, I feel like this is pulling our votes, and I don't think that's right, but I don't know exactly where I sit. I'm absolutely against raising taxes always, but I also understand the cost of living is just going up, and we don't want the children's education to suffer. So I need to do a lot more looking into things. I think a lot will kind of depend on our next conversation too, and our action, because we had made some suggestions last year, and I feel like those were absolutely ignored. And so if nobody's, we keep saying we are making cuts, we as a board have no idea what cuts have been made. So that would be nice for us to know. I think the directors have a better idea and not that you guys aren't talking to us because you don't. I mean, that's not what you do. It's totally fine. But I have no idea what has been cut. So until we can actually look at things like our next discussion, I don't know where I sit.
Well, and I think that when we're talking about the budget session, you know, if the list of what we could cut and what that would save is something that you want for that discussion, we can certainly put that together.
I would think that would be helpful.
And one of the things that will be on the budget workshop next time is a comprehensive staffing history of what cuts have already been made and how many we have there. We were gonna have it for this meeting, but the tech department that has to pull a lot of that data said we'd really rather get the computers ready for school first. And so I said we could do it. We can do it at the
Understandable.
budget.
That's reasonable. Yeah, you've been a little busy. Just a little bit.
So I think we have two questions that can come to us at that.
Mhm. Well, and I think I don't want to let myself off the hook because everybody else has been very transparent about where they are. I'm probably currently leaning more around a B, honestly, which I recognize is a little lower than everyone else at the moment. And not in a forever sense, not in a like we can't continue moving the right direction after this year. But I do believe that there are still some hard conversations that probably need to be had about some spending that has occurred. I do believe that there are still some areas where maybe we're not being as efficient as we could be. And I also absolutely agree. Like, I don't want to see cuts being made that impact students. And I don't want cuts to be made that impact teachers either. So I'm seeing both sides. I said before, I don't think it's a fix that's going to be made overnight. I think it's a fix that is made culturally. I think it's got to be made throughout the entire district of this is who we are. This is the way that we steward the things that we have been entrusted with. This is where we're heading. This is what we want to save towards. And that's something that you can build on. But I think it has to come with conversations of what would it look like. And not saying anyone's saying we should cut anything, but at least exploring what those things would be, what that would look like. And where I'm very hesitant is just honestly past experience serving on this board. We had hard conversations a couple of years ago budget wise and opted to not increase a budget as much as was recommended to us. And an email was sent out district wide of all the things that were going to be cut because the board was cracking down on budget. And do you know how many of those things were actually cut? None of them. We're still doing all of the things that were in that email that was sent out saying that we were going to have to cut them. And so that's where that's hard to figure out, where do you go with that? Where does that information go? And we had some very hard conversations, and I think we'll probably get into this with our action items tonight. We had conversations a year ago about transfers and what we wanted that to look like. And I would agree. I don't feel like the concerns were expressed by the board. I don't feel like they were heard. So I really want to see that we're all in it together.
And can you forward that?
I'm sure I still have it. Yeah.
Because I do know we made some cuts, so.
Yes.
But I don't know what was on that list.
Yeah,
Well,
I would share it
I'm
with
gonna
you.
push back on that just a little bit because I do think there are some things that I'd have to look at the list and I'm sure I have the email if
Yeah.
you don't. So
Okay.
it's something that, yeah, I do think that there were some things that happened that I don't know that the school district, for example, provides snacks to the elementary
True.
school aged
That-
kids. That was something
right.
that went away. And has-
Breakfast was on that list. The CEP schools were on that list. Busing from Adams to Madison was on that list. There were a lot of things, but you are correct. We don't do snacks anymore. And that might have been something that was brought up at that time. So you're correct on that.
But these two,
This past year.
I mean, so I think, I want to defend the district a little bit and say that it's not like every single thing that the board talked about was ignored. And I think when we get to the next budget, the next topic on our agenda, you'll see that there were some cuts there as well, and will be some going forward. And so, you know, it's, maybe we aren't as, maybe we haven't been quite as open or as whiny about what we had to cut, but we want to be sure that.
Well, and I think you're right there. I think some things have been cut, but we weren't told exactly what. All we saw was the email of this huge list that was going to, and then we heard from parents and teachers alike saying, oh, how dare you do this? And well, did it get cut? Because then we'd go into the schools and it's happening. So it just, maybe lack of communication was where it was at.
I think the transparency, the communication, the openness, those are things. It's always a little bit difficult, because when you start to cut, you don't want to create a panic. You do
Right.
want the staff to feel safe and secure and that they're gonna have what they need to do their job. And so there's always that balance about, and then if you do create a panic, then it looks like a scare tactics, raise taxes, and we don't want to do that either. So when you're talking about fiscal responsibility, we need to be fiscally responsible in every single transaction we have all year long. Are we gonna miss some? It's a big budget, and there's a lot of people handling the budget. And might we purchase something where it wasn't worth our investment? Maybe. Or were there contracts we could have negotiated differently? Maybe. But it's always going forward with positive intent to do the very best we can with the taxpayers' money and to get as many resources as possible into the hands of principals and teachers so that they can do their job for kids. And so we have to work together on it. That's the reason this team is here all at the table, so that we don't have those misunderstandings, where it doesn't feel like nobody's listening on either, I hate to use the word side, from any, however you would say that. So
But we have already been getting so many answers to questions. I mean, we look at all these papers and we're like, spreadsheets, but I love this. Like, thank you, because it does show things. And like I said, it does, when you tell us what was cut, we'll know.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we don't know. So
okay,
All right. Well, on that note, we will pick that conversation back up, but hopefully that gives us at least some ideas of where we might be heading. Our action items tonight, we do have, oh, no, sorry, we've got one more report, legislative update. Do we have anything that we want to discuss? on legislative
Actually, I
update?
do. My
Awesome.
committee meeting was held Thursday evening and Friday
Okay.
in Lincoln. That's why I was not at the welcoming for the teachers. I'm not gonna steal a lot of Colby's thunder, Colby Coash, because he will go through a lot of this at our area meeting, which will be held in September. Basically, what he was gonna talk about is there was more that didn't happen as far as schools than did happen. Which is really true, because there were some bills in there that could have been really atrocious as far as really handicapping us as far as budgets and that type of thing. The biggest thing that he talked about was how much the money coming in, how it keeps growing and growing, and he wouldn't be surprised because the legislature has to take care of that. Might be $1 billion by January, very well could be. But that we'll have to wait and see. Also, it really, really depends on the election in November of all the people that were termed out. And then there were two senators, Von Gilleren and Holcroft, who both came in second in their primary. And Von Gilleren has been the head of the appropriations. So we'll see how that goes, depending on if those two gentlemen can come back from that. But then once you get new people and so forth, then the bills will start coming. And so really the key is going to be after the election to see who gets there, because then they'll start really trying to work on their bills and that type of thing. That was there were 26 of us there from across the state. We had good conversation, and so forth, and but Colby will really go into a lot of detail on last year and what he expects this year at the area meetings.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Moon or Dr. McDonald, do you have anything you want to add on legislative update? Okay, just making sure. All right, then we will now move on to our action items. So the first one that we have is to request a transfer to the activity fund account. So before we open this up for discussion, I would ask that we have a motion on the table to guide that discussion. So the requested motion would be to approve a transfer request in the amount of $400,000 from the general fund to the activity fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Now that we've got that motion, we can open this up for discussion. I think before we dive into our discussion, I would like to have Dr. Moon and Dr. McDonald kind of share the context here with us and bring us all up to speed. And then we can discuss from there. Mr. Spatansky and Mr. Drake. Yeah, if you'll join us up here, that would be great. Thank you.
Start that. Would you like me to start? Okay. I appreciate Mr. Drake and Mr. Spatansky being here. Again, the activity count, typically what I've done in the past with other boards has just been in August, you take a look at some transfers. That could be to depreciation, that could be to the activity, whatever it might be. Some districts handle that differently. Some districts, once the budget is approved, then those dollars that are within the budget that could be transferred, sometimes the administration would just transfer those dollars because it's been approved within the budget process. I just think it's good for you to approve the transfers when they come, or it looks like they need to be and take place. Sometimes it happens within the consent agenda. So if it's a routine situation, a lot of boards have that within the consent agenda under the financial report, and it's pointed out that the transfers are taking place this month. Others have approved it as an action item. So either way is, in my opinion, is transparent, and it gives you the opportunity to make those decisions. Again, you had the historical data in regards to transfers since 2019. So it's something that has taken place in the past, some years not. This year, the request is for $400,000 transfer. And what it typically and what it's going to affect is the high school accounts. And on the information that you have on the PDF, the codes from 7001 to 7019 are the codes that will be zeroed. 7001 to 7017 will be zeroed out at the end of the budget, and that total amount will be moved to the activity tickets as the beginning balance. So if the transfer doesn't take place, the beginning balance within the activity tickets will reflect the negative amounts that are on the current ending balances that you see within this document. And this is up to date currently. So the $400,000 transfer will cover all the accounts up to 7019, and it will also cover the account 7024, which is the summer weight program. And that is the stipend that we have for all of our activity sponsors that are sponsoring the summer weight program this summer for those activities and those kids that are participating in those activities and utilize that opportunity as well. So that's what the amount reflects at this particular point in time. I asked Mr. Drake and Mr. Spatansky to be available to provide any answers to any questions, but then to maybe provide a synopsis if they have a synopsis or have anything to say in regards to the activity account. And as obviously Mr. Drake is new as the activity director, and we appreciate everything he's done to date and what he's going to do for the future of the activities program. He's had an opportunity to dive in and take a look at some things, and he is gaining a quick understanding of what it's going to take place and what to look for in the future as it pertains to each activity and those particular accounts throughout the course of the year as it relates to equipment, supplies, travel, food, whatever it might be. So Dr. Moon, do you have?
Yeah, I think the one thing, the reason that we're only concentrating on that little box of expenses there is those are the expenses to run the activities program. And the district has an opportunity, some districts actually put their activity in the general fund. Because this is what we're spending, everything outside of that box, you'll see negative balances there. Those are fundraising accounts, those are not really our money. Their monies that the booster clubs have raised or whatever. These are the costs of the actually running activities. There will never be even, because this is referees, this is uniforms. And the reason they're uniform, they are travel. They're talking about certifying the football helmets at $157 each. But the reason that most districts use the activity fund is because those special funds allow us to carry money from year to year. So if we budget $40,000 for uniforms, when we're doing cross-country uniforms, we're probably only gonna need about 5,000. But when we're doing football uniforms, we're gonna need 40,000. And so it allows us to put money over there and it can just sit there until we need it. And there's a rotation for who gets new uniforms. Not everybody gets new uniforms every year, or they shouldn't. And if they do, we'll be talking to you.
You know?
But I think that there's it's not. The only ones we're actually asking you to take care of are the routine expenses that you have to have to run the program and to provide activities for our kids. In these other funds, those are things that people have raised money for. They've come from a special project or whatever that are designated somewhere else. We're not asking you to cover the shortfall on those fundraising accounts, only these accounts. And so, and I think there's lots and lots of research that says kids that are in activities are very, very productive, they're good learners, those sorts of things. And so, and in full disclosure, these expenses that are in the activity fund do not pay the coaches.
No.
Coaches are out of the general fund and they're out there supplemental salaries. So the cost of these programs is higher than this. So with that, I think it's important to let you guys talk a little bit about where you are with the activity funds and then answer questions.
Sure. Are there particular questions that folks had to ask first? I mean,
Well, I just have a couple from the papers that I was given the other day to today. The final number is different. Why is that?
What's final number?
From Thursday to today, your number here.
So
your
the
soft-
number on Thursday was higher, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, so some of those funds, they were reduced. So for example.
It was softball and activity.
Softball, the revenue, we did a journal entry because a lot of the expenses there were charter buses.
okay.
And so we took the charter buses and placed them in the general fund where they were supposed to be under transportation.
Okay.
And so that reduced that amount
Mhm.
in regards to where they're currently at with their fund. And so I think that in all said and done, it was like $68,000 that was in the activity fund as far as charter buses. And if you remember, in January, that was an additional expense that we hadn't
Right.
budgeted for because of drivers and those types of things. Still had to support our activities. Every charter bus was $3,000 plus in regards to every time we had to utilize their services. And so those were additional expenses that showed up in the activity fund. They should have been in the
It should have been
transportation.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
And the reasoning for that, and I know we talked about it then, is primarily staffing, correct? We don't have enough bus drivers
Right,
to.
that, and I think one of our drivers had some health concerns, and so therefore he had to take care of himself. And so
Yep.
we had to make a decision to maintain our activities and get the kids where they needed to go.
So just some summaries. And last year we had 641 participants and activities across the board at North Platte High School. And I want to focus, Mr. Drake and I were kind of digging through the accounts on here. And so let's just focus on three right now. We'll really break them down to give you an idea of what we're looking at and how we plan to move forward. So we looked at football, we looked at volleyball, we looked at softball. And amongst those three activities, there's about 150 kids in those three activities. So the revenues from football are gate. I mean, that's really what you have. And the gate receipts this year in football were $20,426. The officials cost for football this year were $5,600, a little over $5,600, $5,670. We do have some students that we pay to run the video board, and that was a $485 expense. And then some of the larger purchases out of the $34,636 were helmets to the tune of about 15 grand. I had to look up again because it's been a while since I've been an AD, but the cost of a game football is $120. Reconditioning of football helmets. We're reconditioning half of our helmets every other year, and that runs about $160 a pop. And this year, I think it was $7,400 just to recondition helmets. To buy new helmets, it's about $400 to $500, and so we did invest in some of those shut helmets this year. And that was the biggest expense there. The travel, when we look at the US Bank charges, oftentimes we're traveling 50, 60, 70 kids to varsity, or we're traveling 30, 40 kids, and they're traveling farther than 100 miles. And so when breaking down a lot of those, it was a lot of meal expenses for them. So you can see pretty clearly, even football, the highest probably grossing sport that we've got is still in the red quite considerably. Looking at volleyball, the gate receipts in that particular activity that sponsored approximately 35 kids, we had $6,095 in gate receipts. Officials' costs for volleyball were over $4,000. Entry fees to go participate in some of the tournaments we went to were $450. It was a much smaller video board expense of $90, but purchases in that particular activity were at $859.18. And again, I didn't realize how much more of volleyball is nowadays too. It was $85 for a game Baden volleyball. Antennas, we've got 4 courts that we run, nets that we run, $130 for a set of antennas and $500 for a net. But again, a majority of what we had in our US Bank charges were expenses for meals.
I just want to clarify on the ball, like we are told what to purchase.
Yeah.
Like that's not something we can determine ourselves. Not only do we have to use the Baden brand, but we have to have it NFHS stamped, which comes with an extra cost. So just to clarify that.
Corey, when you're talking about travel, is that, I'm assuming there are rules about how far we go and
Yeah.
whether or not we feed the kids and all of that.
And so Mr. Drake had just reviewed that with his coaches this last week, so I'll let him go into
Just the policy that we've gone off of or ran with has been if we travel over 100 miles, we'll provide $15 per student for their meal. We try to stick when you're traveling between the hours of noon and 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. Sorry. We had a coaches meeting on Friday. I tried to go through all of the new expectations. I can explain everything we talked about as far as finances if you want me to. But this was a topic, and I definitely talked about being fiscally responsible and how we really have to do things differently moving forward. It's not an option. We discussed meals. I discussed making options such as I explained just because you're allotted $15 per student does not mean that we have to spend $15 per student. So making those responsible decisions. Okay, if I'm taking a team for an entire day and I have to buy them lunch and dinner for the evening, okay, let's get a nice meal for lunch, but then let's maybe do pizzas or a cheaper option for that other meal. Just kind of went over some different scenarios with the coaches, explained or just going forward, we're going to change how we do our purchase cards. Just going to require a lot more time in the office on my behalf. So trying to lock that down and be a little more, like I said, fiscally responsible. So just know that conversation was had, and I feel like the clear expectations were laid out. So
what's interesting too.
That are less than 100 miles?
Kearney's basically our example. If you travel to Kearney or past then
So it's unique, since the Greater Nebraska Athletic Conference has disbanded, we don't have like some regular opponents that are part of a conference. And so we're traveling oftentimes 4 hours to the east or 4.5 hours to the west to find competition. So pretty much every one of our activities is, not all of them, but most of them are beyond that 100-mile range. So.
I
You know-
think there are some sports, if I remember from the policy.
and so the way that we do it in our activities office, if it's less than 100 miles, at least I can say moving forward from now will be, we will not use any of those accounts that we're talking about today to fund those meal purchases. Coaches, upon receiving permission from me, can use their fundraiser money that their players have earned to feed their students for those shorter trips. So.
And some of those shorter trips, just because I have experience with students, a golf meet, for example, they're gone all day.
They could be
Yeah,
at
and
Lake
just
Malone.
because they're at Ogallala doesn't mean that by dinner time they're not starving, because they, and they are, they don't stop for lunch on the golf course. They're maybe snacking as they go along, and so some of these sports, just because it seems like, well, they're only in Ogallala but they've been there since 6 o'clock that morning and they're coming home at 6 o'clock that night, you gotta feed them, so. Where it comes from, I guess that's another conversation, but.
There's a lot of gray
Yeah.
areas with it where
When they are on those shorter trips, because I know wrestling's the same way, can we offer like bag lunches? Is that?
so if
cheaper
they
for
leave
you?
before 11:30 a.m. Through Sodexo, as long as it's 24 hours in advance, they will prepare those for them.
But that still comes out of budget somewhere.
Correct.
We still have to pay for that.
Correct.
Is that cheaper at all? I mean, I have no idea.
As Emily pointed out, I'm a little new to this, so I
Right.
don't know the
Okay.
exact price on that right now.
I would imagine a bagged lunch is cheaper than $15. And I would also imagine that if we're serving school lunch and we have, do they still get, like, if they qualify for free and reduced lunch and we're packing them a bagged lunch? Yes, I see you. I'm looking at you. I don't know if you can tell. Yes, it's hard to tell across the room, but is that something, like, are we reimbursed then for those
Can
free and
you-
reduced
can
lunch
you
amounts?
Come up and join us real quick during this conversation.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
You can have the comfy chair.
Oh, thanks, Corey. So the way we've always done it is, the meals we've never done them as a reimbursable. We have done them as they get a couple options of a sandwich, chips, fruit, and a bottle of water. Last year they ran between $7 and $7.50. We do a choice of a meat or they can have Uncrustables. So a cold lunch sandwich is like the $7.50, and actually I think we were $7.75 for the Uncrustables because they get two. Dr. McDonald and I have talked about possibility of maybe doing those at reimbursables. There's just some different scenarios to look at when it comes to, money in their accounts, as we already know. That's an issue that we deal with, but there's lots of scenarios, but yes, not every sport does it. Football, cross country, track, occasionally speech used to do it, but those are our three biggest sports that do it.
And those three sports, I would say, are our biggest programs, plus
Yes.
the ones that travel.
So they
leave
do,
school
yeah.
Earliest in the day.
And so if they're gonna be gone for lunch, they do grab a sack lunch before they go. We prepare them and they come and get them. What they do after that, there's times if they're not leaving, there's times in the past we provided those for supper.
Okay.
They've eaten at school and then we've done them for supper because it was cheaper and easier than going through a restaurant, fast food restaurant.
Did that get offered to all the coaches too? I'm assuming.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Yep.
They should learn about it in their coaches meeting.
talk
So
about
what
it.
they,
Right,
yep,
perfect.
what they do from there is we're
Great.
always there to do it.
We just
Yes,
have that
thank you.
11:30 a.m. cutoff because
Yeah, that makes.
obviously if they leave after that, then they have the time to eat at school and cafeterias before they leave. So
But there still is a chance to get one for dinner.
yes.
We have done that in the past, yeah.
So
If
that's
they're not
awesome.
leaving. Sometimes also what you run into is when you're 11:30, 12 o'clock. leaving. It depends on what their lunch schedules.
Right, if they have time to
as
grab
well.
something, yeah.
But a lot of kids, that's the problem they run into, but that's their choice. And that's if they choose to leave to go home and grab something they forgot or whatever, then they don't eat, so. But
And is
Great.
that, so when if a coach opts to do that, does that show up? I mean, is that coming out of their same account? I just didn't see a lot of Sodexo charges on there, on the accounts. So I wasn't sure if that shows up somewhere
No.
else in our,
that would be I don't know how Janelle and Lori do that, so
okay.
that would.
Sorry, Kyle.
I mean,
It's
it's
a
bill the
question.
district, but or that activity, but what they do after that, I'm
Okay,
not sure of.
where it shows up, we're not sure. Okay. Okay, thank you for
You're
answering
welcome.
those questions. I appreciate it.
But
So a few of the other things that we're looking at too is, we built a spreadsheet this spring called All Levels, All Activities, and it has things on it that will be grades 7 through 12, things that happen both at home and on the road. And it's going to help us to better organize. This last year, we were using both Bound and Our School, which were two different platforms. And so there was some issues where we had some travel that was scheduled on top of other travel. So some of those charters that we had were avoidable, and seeing the cost of some of those, I'm like, that we can do a better job of organizing this. So Mr. Drake jumped on board, Mr. Butler jumped aboard, Mr. McCoy and myself, and we started pounding out all the dates. And so we've got a fairly comprehensive list, and, we're communicating better with John about avoiding those. We're also working better with Jenny in the front office, because that sheet will then show her who is going to be absent and what types of subs we need to have. So we can have some savings that are going to be found in that aspect as well. Just really, as Mr. Drake had mentioned, the purchase process that we're going to be implementing in the activities office will mirror what's happening at the district level and what's happening with our business purchases at the high school as well. So we'll be leveraging into that link system to better sort that out and have the purchase order system in place, so that there's not as much maybe purchasing that's taking place without prior approval. So
And is there a rotation for the purchase of equipment and uniforms?
We have a uniform.
Everybody get them here or?
No, it's roughly 6 years, I believe, but we have a rotation that's been
Yeah, we
passed
should have
down
the
through us.
spreadsheet somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
that's for uniforms. Having been an activities director, there are things that you do on an annual basis that you just they cost. For example, what used to be a $200 expense when I was coaching and teaching as a bat is now maybe $600 or $700. But you're having to invest in certain equipment, whether it's the baseball program or the softball program every year. So there are purchases like that. I didn't realize like a dozen softballs is now almost $200. And if you're buying a box of baseballs, we're talking about, several $100s for those as well. And you go through several of those boxes a year. So
Well, the
and so
state will come
requisition-
in. Go ahead.
Those requisitions that we do are going to mirror too, as the seasons are wrapping up for Mr. Drake. We've talked through this, having your coaches meeting, having your requisition list put together. It makes perfect sense to me to have a fairly stable amount of money that just grows every year. That's considered a quote unquote transfer to help support, knowing that we're not going to have the revenues that we need to support all of the activities, but we know the value that these activities have for our students, and also the pride and the opportunity they provide to our community. So there's just some pieces like that Mr. Drake will be working on as he's going through his first year to try to get to a really consistent budgeting process.
I was just gonna add to the comment on equipment. There's some things that are kind of out of our control. When we do the reconditioning that Dr. Moon mentioned with our football helmets, they can say that football helmet's no longer allowed. It's like, oh shoot, we have 60 of those. Replacing 60 football helmets is not a easy task. So things like that are kind of, we're at their mercy. And so if we can buy a few here and there versus, oh shoot, we got to buy 40, that's $16,000 in one pop versus 5 here, 4 here, 3 here. So developing a little more strategy to that. And I think our coaches have done a nice job of keeping inventories at the end of their season and checking those things, but It's obviously always something we can get better at, so continuing to monitor that and grow that. The other thing I would just mention is Title IX. Obviously, we've added girls wrestling and making sure that our programs are equitable across that is, you know, if we buy this for the baseball team, then we better do it for the softball team. If we buy this for boys wrestling, then we better do it for girls wrestling, and making sure that our numbers of coaches and supports that they have in those programs are also equitable. So there's some things that we can get somewhat in our control. There's some things that aren't, so.
I had teenagers. I'm trying to think about a 6-year rotation on a uniform with.
Yeah.
That seems like a long time.
Right?
Especially in high school,
And
where their growth spurts hit.
It's,
I personally understand the transfer and I understand everything. Last year, I had made a comment that I was hoping that the activities fund would be looked at better, and everything that you've explained sounds amazing. And thank you guys so much for doing that. I think I was just sticker shocked when we went from, I'm trying to look to make sure I say my numbers right, 223,000 to 400,000 was just like, whoa, what happened? Did nobody listen? So, going by what you're saying, that sounds amazing. There are things that you can't control. And the last thing we want to do is take activities away. Like, I would hate that. My kids loved them. So, yeah, like, thank you. Thank you for looking at it closer. That's all we can ask. I appreciate it.
Have you guys seen growth in some of these programs too? Do you think that's added to some of the cost? It seems like wrestling, girls wrestling especially, has kind of exploded.
absolutely.
This I know has been really high for a couple
The
of
new
years.
activities have really boomed, ladies wrestling and baseball. I mean, they're two of our highest sought out sports. So yeah, I think just having those opportunities, you don't have some of the opportunities that we provide in some of the area schools around us. You take a swimming and diving team and having to buy a swim jacket, things of that. I mean, they're just specialty things that you're not going to find at other locations. So yeah, we have seen, growth in some areas. Like I said, 641, I think is what we talked about earlier.
in any activity sport.
Sports club activities. So that's nearly, it's a little over half our student body, but some of them are 2 or 3 sport or activity participants. But I guess when you break it down like that, you're looking at probably like $620 a kid to participate. Whereas on the front end, $40 for, maybe a participation ticket, or maybe a few extra bucks for an instrument rental, things of that nature too, to help defray some of those costs. But
To kind of piggyback on that, do you know what any of the past year's participation was? Like 641 sounds like a lot. It'd be interesting to compare that to years historical as we
This off
compare
$6
dollars.
445. I just was able to get last year's, but I can work on the other ones if you want me to.
Okay. I think that would be just good for us to kind of know, because I think that if there is growth there, then it's a little bit easier to stomach growth in the dollars also. But if there's not, or if there's ever a decline, and then that's something that we would want to take a look at also, of course. So I think, it's not urgent by any means, but I think it would be useful information for us to have, and knowing how we want to see that move forward in the future.
I guess one other note just on the food portion of it. Knowing that student athletes especially, typically have higher caloric needs. I guess it's something, as we're making adjustments, just encourage that the coaches really communicate with the families that if their student is coming home from Lincoln and they're starving because we haven't been able to provide them with adequate food, that they're taking it upon themselves to bring snacks or whatever. And maybe that's something that they can do through their fundraising accounts. Coaches maybe could bring additional items, that way too, or something. But I know I would hate to have a kid who's playing football and then we throw a sandwich at him and it's not enough, because they do have higher needs because they're teenagers, and then also because they're active athletes. So
Is that something, so I am not a North Platte High School graduate, so I did not do sports here in our high school. Is that how we've always done it? Because I mean, when I went to high school, my high school did not provide, like we didn't stop at restaurants. You packed a lunchbox. So in my mind, that is kind of what was normal. That's what we did. Maybe occasionally it would be a treat if we were going somewhere and it would be communicated to parents ahead of time and my mom would send me with money or I would use my own money. So I'm just curious, like historically, if that is the norm in this district or if not, when that changed. I'm just kind of trying to understand
I
that
mean,
practice.
In the time that I've been in this role, it's been a fairly normal practice.
I started
we
my
started-
career here in 2012 as a teacher and coach, so you did then.
I can tell you, as I was a sponsor coach for many years here, that it was not. But however, Mr. Simpson was very instrumental in getting that done for everybody. Because speech, drama, that we weren't included in those type of things at the time. And right after I left, Mr. Simpson saw that it wasn't even with everybody else. And so he put all the activities and along with the sports, and then that's where it evolved from. But they always were providing meals for football, basketball, the sports, and the other activities kind of had to take care of themselves. But he took care of that, and we would take it. I would take it out of my yearly budget to help pay for that. Because sometimes where you have to go is dictated by the state. Example, our entire football schedule is developed by NSAA over a 2-year cycle. Where our people have to go for districts or state, whether it's music, speech, activity, any other activity or sports, is dictated where they put them. Now, most of the time, I know for play production now, Class A is almost always in Omaha or Lincoln now. Speech districts are almost all in Omaha or Lincoln now. So, those travels that we have to do for 200 and some miles are dictated by that. Like our football team going to Omaha, Lincoln, Norfolk, Columbus, those places, and that is dictated. So it was a great help when we do this, because you take a kid that they leave for Omaha for football like at 9:30 in the morning or so. I'm just pulling that out of my head. And they don't get home till like 1:30 or 2. That's a long day for a kid. So.
Well, and I think we've seen a little bit of a shift too, in just kind of the culture of things. I know in the time that I've had kids in school, which has been a lot of years now, that is, for example, with the band, they used to meet together and make sack lunches. The parents would donate, bread, peanut butter, ham, whatever. And the number of people that are willing to do that anymore has drastically decreased. And so I think there's been a need to find other resources to provide food. So whether families don't have the time, don't have the resources, whatever it is. And then I do know that there are families that, that do have limited resources. And so I think just to make it equitable for students so that everybody's being fed and being fed properly and all of those kinds of things, then there's been more of a shift to eating out, I guess. But and then I know a lot of people that are like, well, just get businesses to donate. And I was looking, is Terry still here?
No.
So, but that's something that we run into all the time too, is that, we have limited resources in North Platte too. And when everybody's asking Papa Murphy's or whatever, for pizza, then they eventually they have to say, sorry, we can't feed everybody. So it's just one of those things that that we have to be cognizant of, is that, yeah, we'd love to have 100 restaurants donate meals, but there's limited resources there too. So.
Well, and I do think that there are parents who can't give someone $20 to go
Mhm.
eat or for 2 meals. You know, and maybe it is a discussion with Booster Club to say, you know, to what extent could fundraising dollars help us to feed, or could they get together and make sandwiches, those sorts of things. I do suspect that Booster Clubs do a lot of the other meals that the Thursday before the football game, parents get together.
I think those are mostly parents, aren't
Yeah.
they? I don't think it's Booster Club.
Correct.
You can look at, there's with the, because I didn't want to say it wrong, the free and reduced lunch. So our free and reduced lunch percentage is also. And that, I mean, that matters.
Mhm.
And that's part of who we are as a district. And we've always, I mean, this is from 2020 to 2021, we've been above the state average. Almost by between 5 and 10% above the state average. And that goes with that. And I mean, we're not just talking about families. I mean, we're talking about families that have free and reduced lunch. And we're talking about a school district that does travel.
Right.
Cause I just told Jane, my furthest was an hour away. Like that's the furthest we travel,
Mhm.
you know, so. No, I didn't need to be fed because I would be home in less than an hour. So I think those two things are a big deal.
Yeah.
And
Constructive.
And I know you said it was $15 a meal. Is it a meal or a day? Cause like a wrestler goes all day.
It would be per meal. So we
Okay,
try to say
so-
8 a.m., 12
So
p.m.
you get your 2 in there.
and 6 p.m. Yep.
Cause I have no idea, just maybe if you're gone for 2 meals, you do 1 sack lunch and then you do a meal. I don't know if that would, you're
I feel like
starting to
that's
look
kind
at
of what we talked about
nickels
Friday
and
in our
dimes
meeting
right
is
now, but
finding ways to be as frugal as possible and
get those team parents,
options. But
make
I
them do
mean,
it.
Joanne brought up a really good point, you know.
Yeah.
You're playing 60 minutes in 85, 90-degree weather. Your
Mhm.
caloric requirement's gonna be a lot higher than it would be if you're doing something less active. So.
You can always bring back the Merle burger.
What's that?
So you can always bring back the Merle burger with really
Yeah.
nice hamburger bun with ham and processed cheese and bag of chips.
I
Yeah,
think,
that's all we had.
I think what I struggle with, Eric, I appreciate you bringing up the free and reduced lunch amounts, because I know, so we've also had conversations about lunches, and we were provided a number of how we would be able to feed everyone lunch. And those are the kinds of things that I wrestle with when you see this number and you know what you could do with that number elsewhere in the district and the number of kids that could feed lunch to every day in the district. Those are the decisions that it's like, this is a lot of money, because it's not just $400,000 that we're spending on this. It's, close to a couple million activities accounts on this page. Plus we're not counting payroll, plus we're not probably counting busing, facility. I mean, there's a number of things, ticket takers that aren't in there. And so just the overall number is it's hard for me to stomach that, knowing that we're then unable to do things elsewhere that I think would probably impact more students with the same or less dollars. And that is really hard. And I also probably just struggle in general with the culture of our world today, because when I grew up, I had a single mom household. I didn't always get the new things and the $20 to go, spend at wherever with my friends. Like I had a job at 14. My parents dropped me off at work Saturday morning and I worked. And if I wanted to go and get pizza after a game with friends, like I would have taken my own money. And I'm not saying that we should expect that of all teenagers. I realize the world is different today, but I also think we're selling their level of responsibility a little bit short in that we're just providing everything for everyone. And are we teaching them hard work? Are we teaching them? I don't know. It just seems like a lot. And I don't get to eat out every time I go somewhere and have $15 to spend. Sometimes I ordered a $4 biggie bag from Wendy's because I'm driving through somewhere and I'm hungry. And that's what you do when you're operating on a budget.
Other questions or comments?
I guess kind of where I'm at with this is that, okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve this. There was a question that was asked and an email response was sent to us about, if we don't approve this $400,000, what happens then? Well, then we just continue running a negative balance. So knowing that we're looking at being more fiscally responsible moving ahead, I guess we just need to, I'm ready to call the question if we need to decide if we're gonna approve this or not. So, or if we're gonna continue to run a deficit. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. All right, I had more I wish to say, but if you want to call it to question, I do have a conversation that I would like to have with you guys at some point that I think is probably relevant, but we'll go ahead and call that to question, Sheila.
Kelly Garrett,
Nay.
Angela Blazy,
Aye.
Mitch Wagner,
Aye.
Dave Ballsey.
Aye.
John Landry.
I,
Okay, motion passes. All right, we will go ahead. We will do this in two separate motions. Thank you guys for answering our questions tonight. We appreciate that. The first motion on the table would be to adopt a revised option enrollment policy 5004. Do I have a motion on the table for that?
I will make a motion to adopt option enrollment 5004.
Second.
Okay. We will go ahead. Dr. Moon, I'll have you kind of bring us up to speed because I think that this was your brilliant idea. So,
Right.
no.
When we took a look at because we're at the elementary schools, as we've talked a little bit about, we have closed about every grades 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, we're really full, especially at several of our buildings. And so one of the things that we're allowed to do with option enrollment is to set our capacity. And so last year you did set a capacity. But our policy has kind of conflicting information. So at our grade levels, high school, middle school, it is by grade level in the current policy. At the elementary level, it is, it's by actual classroom. And that changes from year to year, and it's really changed this year in terms of, which buildings are closed and which buildings are open. And so, our attorneys took a look and said, we can just delete that section in the middle. And because the first part of your policy says, if classrooms, for the purposes of option enrollment, primary grades at 20, the upper grades at 22, that can be our bar, that can be our capacity. So all we really can do there is to say we've got 13 sections of readers. We have 13 sections of kindergarten. We could, for the purposes of option enrollment, take 260 kids. We have room at kindergarten, everything else is closed because that's not based on the number of classrooms in the district, that's based on the number of teachers. And that option enrollment is not supposed to cause the district to have to hire additional staff to serve option students. And so that's going to vary from year to year based on the number of sections that we have there. And so, but right now our policy wouldn't exactly allow us to deny a student because we set the capacity classroom by classroom, even though Jefferson's 4th grade is full now, it wasn't full last year, and you can set that capacity for 2 years going forward. And so I think that it's expedient for us to just go ahead and say, for the purposes of option enrollment, this is where we are. And just change the policy and then we're in good shape. In regards to programs and special education, there's that whole section there that says, if you would be required to hire additional staff, if it's going to cost you more money, you can deny option students. And the reason that it's really important that we look at it right now is that the law has changed. And so in the past, we could deny an option student if they required special education services. Now can still do that. But if we've accepted a sibling, we have to take the special ed, even if they require an out-of-district student. So we have to be a lot more careful about which students we take on, because we don't want to add more teachers to our budget to serve students who we are optioning in. And so the recommendation is just clean up our policy. We did not look at that. That was an optional policy from KSB. And so when we looked at policies in July, we really looked at that one. And we as the cabinet will go back and take a look at the other optional policies that KSB provided for us to be sure that there's nothing else in those options that we should be looking at as we go forward. So our recommendation is that we just simplify the policy and set it based on grade level rather than
Makes sense.
building by building.
Makes sense.
So we probably need a motion.
We've got a
The
motion.
motion's already there.
Second.
Yep.
We're just discussing.
Yeah, we need.
Yes. Thank you for that. And I think that this is a really good thing and an important thing for us to look at. And I think gut reaction when we first discussed it is like, gosh, we hate to deny students who want to come. Like, we're literally branding ourselves as a destination school district. We want this to be the place that people come, but we also fiscally, we have to prioritize educating the students in our district. And so, this is something that we have to look at. You can't accept opt-in students at the expense of your teachers having overly large class sizes or jeopardizing the education that your students are receiving. So I think even though it's like kind of a little heartbreaking, these discussions are important to have. So I think I feel great about the policy revision. Board members, do we have any questions for Dr. Moon or any thoughts
No.
that you want to discuss?
She explained it very well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll go ahead and call that to question, please, Sheila.
Angela Blazy,
Aye.
Mitch Wagner.
Aye.
Steve Alter,
Aye.
Joanna Green,
I,
Aye. Okay, we need a second motion on the table within this agenda item. So I would now entertain a motion to approve or adopt, probably is the correct language, the resolution on school district standards for acceptance or rejection of option enrollment applications.
I'll make a motion to adopt the option enrollment resolution for whatever, 25, 26 document.
Second.
I don't know.
I think we need to clarify, it probably needs to be 26, 26.
Oh, I was like, that's why I was
Yeah, the
like,
document is still labeled,
wait,
but in the
so we
motion.
need to update that.
and we can set the capacity for 2 years. You can set it for 26.7.
All right, that's it. That's what I want for 2 years. Got that? Thanks, Sheila.
Okay. So again, Dr. Moon, I'll let you kind of start off on what we changed here in this resolution.
The resolution basically is this just implementing the policy that's there. And I do want to use this opportunity to maybe take a look at the one document that you have here at your table that kind of lets you know why we're in this particular position. And this, we will have a more comprehensive report on staffing history over the time that it's there, but we took a look at just the elementary because the elementary is the only one that's affected by this policy change. And it just takes a look, and I think it helped me and it helps us to understand that the district has been consistently cutting staff in response to the enrollment drop. Because you can see there, the first one is elementary T's, that's teachers. Elementary teachers in 2017, 10 years ago, we had 101 elementary teachers. Now we have 74 elementary teachers. And we've been really efficient. So in 2017, we probably could have taken off enrollment. But because we've systematically reduced staff because we have fewer students and you've closed a couple of buildings, so we're probably 4 buildings. You closed 3 and repurposed 1. Because Buffalo used to be an elementary school. So we've been able to be more efficient in, in how we have our staffing there. But I think and so we'll have these other numbers as well, but I think it's important to say we have been responsive to the lowering enrollment. And the cuts have not really actually come to the middle school, high school, because those lower enrollment numbers haven't quite gotten there yet, but they will be coming there. And so planning for that is something that we can do in the future. But I just wanted it to help us inform why we need to set those numbers at class sizes of 20 and 22. And that is a discussion I think the board needs to have, and we're talking only about option enrollment, where our capacity is. Because if we have kids move in, we're gonna have to go above and beyond 20 and 22. But that would be our target number. If you don't want that to be your target number, and you want that target number to be 18 and 20 or 27 and 29, that's a discussion for the board to have. As we set this resolution. So that's the only real decision that you have to make in the resolution, is where do we set total grade level number for the purposes of option enrollment. And right now that is 20 per section at the primary and 22 for upper grades.
Would your recommendation be that we keep those numbers the same?
I think so. I think for now, I think that's the best thing to do. It gives us some time to take a look at what that is. Because, we talked a little bit about, we did cut some administrators, but we also added back in elementary teachers to just talk about some of these numbers. So taking a look at where we want that number philosophically, and for the purposes of option enrollment, maybe 2 different conversations. But I think for the purposes of where we are right now, we don't need to be taking any more option students at the elementary, because we just simply don't have a place. We don't have enough staff to serve them and our own students. So that's my recommendation.
Board, how do you feel about those numbers?
Fine. Yeah. I definitely don't want to overburden our teachers.
Well, and especially where we're just talking option enrollment, so we could have 20 kids move in, in the first 3 months of the school year into a certain grade level or whatever, and then we would have to hire a teacher, so. Yeah.
And he's like, yep, it'll happen next week. Just be ready. Just today, Monday.
Yeah, I think in the spirit of protecting the students that are in our districts, like we may say 22, we can go higher than that in grades 3 to 5, and we do, obviously, but you're planning for, we probably will get new students and we need to have room to put them.
Live in the district.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and there's probably people wondering, well, don't you get money for option in students? And that is not going to be the case for North Platte Public Schools. We would have to get 500 in some of them for us to be a net option positive district, where it would get us money in the state aid formula. So unless you've got 500 applications there, that's not even a
Wednesday.
budgetary issue.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
wait till Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, we do have some option students that come in, especially at the secondary level, and we have room to serve them. It's a lot easier in those buildings to serve them.
But we can't take them if they have a younger sibling. Correct, at this point. Right. That's kind of what we're looking at, just making sure following that, okay.
Yeah, that's a great, because you could accept them and maybe they only applied for that one, but then next year, maybe there's a first grader that we don't have room for. So yeah, those are things to consider.
And the state does allow us to ask that question, where in the past we probably couldn't. But Now we could in the past ask you, does the student have an IEP? But now we can even ask if we have a sibling with an IEP.
Any other questions or discussion on this? Okay, hearing none. Sheila, roll call, please.
Ms. Wagner.
Aye.
Skip Ballsy.
Aye.
Ben Landry.
I,
Emily Garrett.
Aye.
Angela Blake.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We will take a quick look ahead at our future board calendar. Tomorrow morning, we've got Joanne and Dr. McDonald, correct, on the radio. There is a NASB webinar, gosh, I can't talk, August 13th. Our committee of the whole meeting, August 27th, which we will have here instead of McDonald. And then one thing I wanted to make sure that board members had on their calendar is September 2nd, the area membership meeting for NASB is here in North Platte. That is a very cost-efficient way for us to all get some much needed training and caught up to speed on legislative issues and all of the things. So I would highly encourage you, that typically starts evening time. I don't know the start time on
Like
it.
5.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And last through the evening. So I would encourage you, if you are at all able to make that, email Sheila to get registered, which reminds me I need to do that, Sheila. And then I would happily sign off on all board members being there. I definitely encourage it. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
You and me, Skip.
I was given time.
Roll call, please, Sheila.
Making me wait now. Reaction is to-
Aye.
I.
Emily Garrett.
Aye.
Angela Blake.
Aye.
Ms. Wagner.
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you for all of the time.
I said I was gonna read that and then I called it.